I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
What is up, everyone, all of our sports lovers out there? This is the official AfterBuzz TV after show for Michael Jordan's The Last Dance. I'm your host, Haley Graves, and joining me today is a panel of awesome people. You know, we might as well call us Haley and the Jays, because first up, we've got Miss Jess. Jess is a overtime host. Jess, tell everyone what's up.
Guys, I'm so excited to talk about this. We have waited so long for this.
No kidding. And next up, we have another lady, Miss Jill, who is a sports and culture analyst.
Hey, I'm super excited to talk about the GOAT, and we also will talk about if he's the GOAT.
We absolutely will. And then last, but certainly not least, our male host, Mr. Jet, who is a sports radio host in Boston.
How's it going? I've been so desperate for anything sports. Last night, I could watch all 10 hours of the documentary.
I definitely think that you're in agreement with majority of us on that. Also, props to you for rocking the basketball jersey for this. Very appropriate.
It's the Michael Jordan Olympic jersey.
Love it.
Hey, it's fitting. All right, guys. So before we dive in, I just want to let everyone know we're going to break this thing down by talking a lot about pre-NBA MJ. So we're going to be talking about his childhood and how he kind of created his mentality. Then we'll talk about his UNC days, move into the draft, his rookie season, then that injury-ridden 1985 season, but that really solidified who he was going to be as an NBA star. Lastly, we obviously have to talk about the villain, Mr. Jerry Krause. And then lastly, we'll dive into some Scottie Pippen. We have a super awesome special segment that Jess is going to talk to us about, as well as some news and gossip by Jet. So before we dive into all of that, Jess, take it away. What were your overall thoughts on these first two episodes?
Oh, I tweeted last night that my chills didn't leave my body throughout the entire time. Jet, you said it best. We have been searching for something to fill this void for the past, month or so. And now it's like, okay, well, it's not completely filled, but it definitely helped out. It was just iconic, and it was the perfect documentary, the perfect two first episodes I could have asked for. I'm just so excited for the upcoming 8 episodes now.
And Jill, our analyst here, give me your breakdown of what you thought of this episode.
I thought it was great because we got to see Jordan unfiltered. The footage was shot in over the last season, and the fact that, you know, they were just themselves behind the scenes before social media. That's such a different vibe now. We have transparency now, but we also know that it's a little bit more at times filtered because they're aware. And so seeing all of this has been really, really interesting.
And then Jet, you got anything to add? You kind of topped it off for us, but what else were your thoughts?
It's just, it's like a throwback to my childhood when I really fell in love with sports and basketball. That's when Michael Jordan was sort of at the height of his powers. And you got to see a little bit of that, teasing what we're going to get as the episodes go on. But sort of seeing, you know, where he came from, sort of the humble beginnings. Everybody knows the story. Oh, he got cut from his varsity team, and he worked even harder to become the Michael Jordan that we all know today. It's just so exciting to see, sort of revisit that. He's almost like a non-human figure. He's like a deity in our society now. So to sort of see this behind the scenes footage of Michael Jordan, it's just like, wow. I mean, people have been waiting their whole lives for this sort of stuff.
They refer to him as a god. So you're right with that statement.
I couldn't agree more, guys. I was just so filled up by this. You know, seeing everyone on Sports Social talking about this made me so excited that we finally had something of sports to discuss. And then even for me, I was on the opposite end of Jet, which I'm super glad that you're here so you can talk about from your perspective. Because for me, I've grown up in the LeBron James era. I was 2-3 years old when Michael was at his peak. And so, but this series is going to really show us what makes him the GOAT. And this debate is going to linger forever now, I feel like. But what I found most interesting was just his mentality. Kind of, Jill, how you were saying about the unfilteredness. Like, he was seriously competitive, and it fired me up. Like, I was like, man, I need MJ to come and like motivate me to get out of bed every day now, because that's what he's like known to do. And so I thought that was really cool. But guys, let's dive right into talking about his childhood. And speaking of his childhood, his father and his brother, Larry Jordan, who they credit as being almost better than basketball than MJ at the time. Jill, you're laughing over there. What were your thoughts when this was happening and we were kind of seeing this really competitiveness start at a young age for MJ?
Well, as you said, the seeds were planted for his competitiveness within the family. He was trying to beat his older brother. We hear that a lot in sports. We hear that, brothers challenge each other, push each other. They know their games. And that's what I felt that we learned about Jordan, how he got that fight, that he just wanted to get better. And their dad seemed to be really hard on them in a loving way. But, we see shades of that now in LeVar Ball and other people like that, So.
Absolutely.
I love it. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go, Jess. What were you going to say?
What I've always noticed with a lot of athletes that tend to be either the top of their class or the most elite or the GOATs, there's always a reason. They don't grow up having like this perfect household. There's always something to it. Today I just interviewed Kenneth Murray, who's an NFL prospect, and he shared that he had 3 siblings growing up who were all adopted, all had special needs. 2 of them couldn't even move. So he was just fired up wanting to kind of do what they couldn't do. He wanted to make them proud. And you could just kind of see that within Michael Jordan, where he grew up with this competitive nature and he wanted to do it for his family,
Yeah, you can even look at football and Tom Brady, another guy who's in the GOAT conversation, and he grew up with all sisters, but they were all better at sports than him growing up. So that sort of motivated him to say, I can't be, I can't be the worst of all my siblings at sports. Right. And that you see it all the time with athletes who have siblings. And I know later as the show goes on, and this is what you're hearing on social media all the time, it's bringing up the classic Jordan versus LeBron, who's actually the GOAT debate. Mm-hmm. LeBron is an only child. So you see sort of the differences there in how they react, what motivates them, different sort of things. And I think it's those parallels that are going to be fascinating and really lead to some just awesome debate, really to the end of time, is who's really the GOAT, because there's so many differences and yet they both excel at just an unbelievable level.
They're also very different leaders.
Yeah.
Extremely.
Yeah.
I think that
LeBron far more of a passive leader. Michael Jordan is possibly the most aggressive leader, that type of leadership style you'd see. And we saw a little bit of that on display. And what I've been hearing from some of his former teammates on Twitter is you haven't seen anything yet in terms of what Michael Jordan was like.
Jeez, that actually kind of fires me up. I'm not going to lie, but it's interesting that all 3 of you noticed the sibling part, whereas for me, I noticed the parent perspective. So we actually saw, I don't know if anyone paid attention, but almost the most emotional I feel like I saw Michael Jordan get in these first 2 episodes was when he was talking about this time with his father and with his brother, and the fact that he always desired for his father to approve of him, and then on the flip side, it was almost kind of messed up hearing his father talk in these like anecdotes, because his father almost made a game out of it. How he was saying whenever Michael didn't bring him the right tool, he would tell him to go inside and be with his mom, that he couldn't, handle being outside with the men. And that just kind of blew my mind, because for me, like, I was always like that. I always wanted to make my parents proud above all. And so it really stood out to me, the quote his dad said, saying, if you want to bring out the best in Michael, tell him he can't do something as good as else. And I think that was like the telltale sign that just propelled Michael in almost every venture that he ended up becoming successful in, is because of that, because you were telling him you couldn't do something, And so, like you said, Jet, how he didn't make his varsity team. They were telling him he couldn't do something. He came back bigger, better, stronger, and proved everyone wrong.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about this at a little bit later, but just to tease that minutes restriction he got put on in his injury-plagued second season, that was the Bulls directly telling him, "Hey, you can't do this." And obviously, and we'll get into more discussion about it, that did not fly with Michael Jordan's personality at all.
Let me just go to a 24-hour fitness and practice on my own or whatever.
Just break all sorts of rules, but hey, it worked. He's the GOAT. So from there, though, we saw him go through these kind of trivial times in high school, getting cut and then having to come back and work even harder. I really liked what his mom had instilled in him, that you don't wait for someone to give you something. You go out, work for it, and earn it. And I think we also saw how important and pivotal his mom played in his life throughout these 2 episodes, which I really appreciated. But then he goes on to play at UNC, which again, inspired by his mom, was because she wanted him to get an education. Jill, what were your thoughts when the head coach, Dean Smith, is talking about him, and then the assistant coach comes on and says and tells us a story about Michael saying, I want to be the best player to ever play here?
I mean, it's what we know of Michael Jordan. It's just more proof that he had that type of work ethic, that type of drive instilled in him from the very beginning. It's nothing fake about it. It's not put on. It's who he is. And he shows that in his practice demeanor, how hard he works. Every time he's knocked down a bit, he comes back stronger. I think it just reinforces the things that we believed about him.
And Jet, what do you think? And what do you think it would have been like to be in college during these days with Michael Jordan at University of North Carolina?
I think it would have been like being with a normal college kid, because you see in that letter that he sent home to his mom, which is hysterical, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, he's asking for stamps. He's asking for like $20 to put into his for food. So it's sort of bizarre to see a Michael Jordan before he was the most famous person on planet Earth. Just he was like, you saw him riding around Chapel Hill on his bicycle. Like, he had posters in his room. He had a poster of Marcus Johnson in his room, who was a player on the Milwaukee Bucks. This was a regular 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And then you look back years later and you say, I was living with Michael Jordan on campus, and he was, you know, eating in the dining hall. He was writing letters to his mom. So it's kind of bizarre. And just touching on what you said about the assistant coach of North Carolina talking about Michael Jordan, that's Roy Williams, who's the coach now of North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so you get one of the great coaches in the history of college basketball, and Dean Smith, who's arguably one of the greatest coaches in the history of college basketball, both raving about Michael Jordan. And these guys have seen the best of the best go through college basketball programs, and they cannot praise Michael Jordan high enough. So when you're comparing him to other guys, you're talking about, between Roy Williams and Dean Smith, probably 60, 70 years of experience coaching college basketball.
Yeah.
And when someone like that stands out, you can tell that they're special.
Yeah, one of my biggest takeaways from this was, because, you know, like watching this whole documentary, we know how good of a player Michael Jordan is, but it's hearing it from his perspective of when he personally felt that he had these breakthrough moments. So they showed us the 1982 college basketball national championship against Georgetown, and how he basically took over that game. And he literally says that game was the game that turned his name from Mike Jordan to Michael Jordan, you know? And so just tell me, what were your thoughts when you were watching that? Because I was just like, this is dope.
Like, it's so cool. Okay, so Haley, I'm about the same age as you. And so you and I grew up more in a Kobe era, transitioned into a LeBron era. So I grew up always saying Kobe is my GOAT. MJ, I'm like, I know you're great, but like, I just have never really seen it. So to finally have this moment of like, okay, I'm starting to understand it. Like, there's other movies, there's other books, there's tons of other stuff I could have read up on and watched to kind of learn about him. But this was, I think, what I really needed to kind of understand what people are always saying when they refer to MJ as the GOAT. The thing that I took away the most from his UNC days was when James Worthy was saying, I was better than he was for about 2 weeks. And then Michael Jordan took that back. He's like, he just can't stand to be worse than anyone else on the court, you know?
And James Worthy is a Hall of Fame player.
Exactly.
Yes, he is.
Showtime, like, he's iconic.
Showtime,
yeah. So then I was going to tell you all this too. I feel like for me, you know, it was funny just like seeing him, so how you're saying, Jet, just normal, you know, right after they won the Natty that we're talking about, he was like, oh, well, I hope I'll win 2 or 3 more while I'm here, you know, and just hearing him talk just so fluidly and naturally. And for me, I grew up in college football. My time in college was the Johnny football era. I went to Texas A&M. So I saw what college athletics can do for a kid that's exceptional at what they're doing. So it was funny to see. I saw almost the opposite side of what we're getting to see what Michael Jordan was like. And I mean, their successes both speak for themselves after that point, but
basically the same trajectory.
Right. And if you think about it, if you think about it, Jordan probably set the stage for players like
Yeah.
Johnny Football and what's to come based off of what he did during his time at UNC.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it funny to hear somebody, a college player now, a great college player, saying, "Yeah, I'm going to be here for 2 or 3 more years." That never happens anymore. I mean, it has to in
Exactly.
football, but not in basketball. They are
One
so
and
ready
done.
to. They are ready to bounce the second the season ends. The second that one shining moment plays when March Madness is over,
Well,
goodbye.
I love it because now it's going even further than that, because you have people like Jalen Green, who's a senior in high school right now, and he's not even going to play in college.
Yeah.
He's going straight to the G League. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, more power to you. MJ would be proud.
Just
His dad, sorry. I was
Oh,
just going
go
to
ahead.
say his dad is very similar as far as kind of pushing him and guiding him as a father like Michael Jordan's dad was in that. So you can see
Good
the seeds
point.
there as well.
Very similar. He's very hard on Jalen as well. Oh my God, I'm so glad you pointed that out. I'm like, all the
Wait.
similarities.
Do you have a
Times have
story for
changed so
us?
much.
Do you have a story?
I wouldn't say I have a specific story. It's just funny noticing. So I believe Jalen's dad is actually his stepfather. I think, right? Yeah. So I worked a little bit on Prolific Prep a couple months back, which is the school or the team that Jalen plays on. And that was my first time ever seeing him play in person. And it's just, you could tell he really is like that next generation, to where I could see him being the next GOAT. I could see him eventually stepping into those shoes. And he's very different from MJ in that but enough about that. Sorry.
It sort of speaks to the entire culture change in basketball, not just the one and done thing, but people like Jalen Green, like you're saying, he's more quiet, more reserved, maybe more friendly with his teammates or his competitors. That's something that's a relatively new trend. And Jalen Green, correct me if I'm wrong, I think was born after Michael Jordan played his last season in the NBA.
He was born in 2001.
Oh, then what? Then yes.
So it's just
end.
it's sort of wild to be looking back at somebody like Michael Jordan, who we all know and everybody's seen the highlights, and realize, wow, he actually retired a long time ago now. It's been a while, and yet he's still in the public conscience and partially because what's the most popular shoe in the world?
Jordan
Jordans.
brand.
I mean, he just the staying power of an athlete is so hard because there's always that next guy that comes up. But with Michael Jordan, with the very rare exceptions, Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, maybe Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson for different reasons, it's so hard to be that guy who stays in the spotlight for so long because everybody is coming for you. Maybe it's Jalen Green, maybe it's LeBron James, maybe it's Kobe Bryant, but what really motivates a professional athlete is I want to be the best. And you saw that with Michael Jordan to a degree that we probably have never seen before him and haven't really seen since.
Yeah, and staying on that same theme, once his time at UNC was done, he was the 3rd overall pick. And then his whole rookie season, it was crazy to me to hear the analysts and the powers to be talking about how he wasn't going to be that special. Oh, he was only 6'6". Oh, we wish he was 7'1". And then he comes in and we see him as this normal kid, but then in these 2 episodes, they talk about that 1984 game against the Bucks. And Michael literally says that was the game he earned his stripes because they were losing in the 4th quarter. They started feeding MJ the ball, and then they came out and won that game. And I think someone said within 2 weeks, everyone in that locker room knew that he was the best player on the team. So it's that same thing we've been talking about, that he just has this overwhelmingly, like, really it's his self-discipline to be the best, and he's not going to take anything for less, and I think it was also in this part that someone talked about him being poetry in motion, watching him play basketball, and it feels kind of the same as y'all are talking about Jalen Green.
Exactly. I think what it really goes to show is that they were down in that game, and MJ was like, why are we throwing this away? Like, the game's not over. What are we doing here? And that's how you can really tell the mentality behind a player is the way they perform in the 4th quarter when they're down. Like, he went out there and he did not give up. He's like, I'll do this myself if I have to.
Like, he literally was the rallying cry for the team. Think about it. Like, I played sports growing up. Like, you always needed that one person that kind of pulled everyone out, got everyone together, and that's what made a team successful, was having the one person with leadership qualities like MJ. And then even at this time, like, he was just a rookie and he was taking command like that. So it was unbelievable, his entire rookie season, going on to win Rookie of the Year, really making a splash in the entire basketball and sports community. But then that 1985 season happened. And so we see him kind of go through an injury, and I was mind blown that he had never missed a game ever.
I know.
Like, that in itself just speaks so much about the type of athlete and, again, his mentality that he has. And so, Jet, you alluded to it. So he rehabs on his own, comes back, has kind of broken all these rules. No one understands how or why his leg is stronger than the other one, but it is. What are your thoughts on the fact that they did this 7-minute limit on him?
You see minutes restrictions in the NBA now with
Yeah, a
players
lot.
come back from injuries, but nothing like that. 7 minutes,
Yeah.
a half is crazy. Obviously, the Bulls at that point knew, well, we have like a prize, commodity here. We have a guy who's probably going to be the best player in the league, probably the most marketable player in the league, and as a business, we can't afford to have him get hurt. Uh, because that's the way that franchises that have never been successful operate. And as you heard some of the backstory, the Bulls were getting outdrawn by indoor soccer teams in Chicago. And for the first time ever, they had this commodity, this player that everybody wanted to see. And they were so nervous about losing that because they'd never been good, that they went the complete other way, as you should, and said, we have to protect it at all costs. When really, if they knew anything about Michael Jordan and they knew anything about a successful sports business model, it's that you want to show them off. You don't want to leave your prized sports car in the garage. You don't want to leave your prized horse in the stable at the day of the Kentucky Derby. And so it's sort of remarkable to see how conservative the Bulls were and how they just lacked a fundamental understanding of Michael's personality at the time and the way to run a winning organization, because that's sending the wrong message to everybody on the team.
Well, and I mean, we'll get to it in a minute, but I think that all very much that poison just stemmed from Jerry Krause, the GM, because they talked about he was the one in this game against the Pacers, that he was the one who came down and he was threatening the head coach's job at this point. And, and it was just fueling all these theories that they were tanking. And it was crazy to me to see Michael Jordan's perspective on tanking the season, because he, without a doubt, knew that this team had what it takes to win. And obviously he probably hates losing more than anything else on the planet. But it was interesting to see, because now I feel like people talk about purposely tanking all of the time, and it's almost an accepted thing now. Jill, what do you think about this term of tanking then versus now?
Well, I think back then, the lottery had started not long before Jordan was drafted into the league. So at that point, I mean, there was an incentive to them. And we obviously heard about Krause's ego and so forth. He inherited Jordan, so he probably was looking to make a splash with his own player at that point for whatever reason, to make it his own selection. So I feel like Jordan, like you said, doesn't want to lose. So it's unheard of to him. I don't know if tanking was really a thing with those 80s teams. I don't know if they thought about it. There were so many dynasties back then as well. So I don't know what the feeling was like, well, we can miss a year and catch back up because we know this is the Lakers year. This is the Celtics year. I'm a Lakers fan. Just have to put that out there. But so I think it was just a different perspective because it was a different game and a different business model at that time.
Yeah, until literally Michael Jordan decided to come in and stop all of that, because after his performance in that game, their team luckily won, which launched them into the playoffs. And I don't know about y'all, but I was like almost chuckling in the fact that it was like, I just feel like we see, Larry Bird compare, actually in the Eastern Conference playoffs, we see him compare Michael Jordan, saying it was God in disguise. But I feel like there's so many times in Michael Jordan's story that God has like shown up to make the world just align perfectly to give Michael Jordan success. I know that might sound a little cliche, but the fact that he came back in this game and it launched them into the playoffs despite them having a 30-52 record. Like, that's God having a hand in all of this. Like, I'm sorry, it just is, to add to this illustrious story of Michael Jordan. And then so they go to the 1986 Eastern Conference playoffs, playing the Celtics. Game 1, MJ's unleashed. She has his 49 points. But the thing that I took away from all of this, and that I thought was really strange that they added in, was this whole golfing story.
I thought that was a really important story because we hear so much. I think we even brought it up about players being too buddy-buddy, but this shows in the heat of the Eastern Conference Finals, Jordan is hanging out with the opposition and they're talking mess, but it didn't stop him from being competitive clearly the next day in that game. So I appreciated it from that standpoint because athletes today take a lot of knocks and critiques about being too friendly with each other, too social. That's one of the big knocks sometimes some people give LeBron. And I think it just shows that if you are locked in, you're locked in.
And to don't go golfing with your enemy the day before a game. But Jet, what were your thoughts on this whole golfing story that they threw in?
Well, it's interesting, obviously, looking back at it now, because Danny Ainge runs the Boston Celtics and Michael Jordan runs the Hornets, and so there's still major factors in the NBA all these years later. But I looked at it more as Michael Jordan was willing to gamble with anybody, anytime, didn't matter. He wouldn't lose his focus. So if somebody said, "Hey, I'll play you for a round of golf for $100," he didn't care. Yeah, sure. I don't care. Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals later today, whatever. So I think that sort of fits with what we know about his personality. But the perspective you have to understand if you aren't well versed in NBA history, and I know a lot of people who are watching this documentary are on the younger end, is that this Celtics team that he played, that was the 1 seed, is considered one of, if not the greatest team of all time. They said 4 Hall of Famers started on that team. They have a 5th Hall of Famer, Bill Walton, coming off the bench. And this is a team that was the prohibitive favorites to win the NBA. They lost 1 game at home the entire year. And as good as Michael Jordan was, no one was giving the Bulls any shot. Obviously, they lost, but the fact that he made it somewhat interesting and competitive for a team that lost 30 more games than the team that they were facing is almost unheard of. Those 1-8 games, even now in the NBA, are usually laugh fest. Every game is a 30-point blowout. Michael Jordan, without any help, because this is pre-Scottie Pippen, made it an interesting series against one of the all-time greatest assembly of players in the NBA's history. And I think he may have said that his coming out party was, against the Bucks in his rookie year. This was when everybody started to say, and you heard Magic Johnson talk about it, you heard Larry Bird talk about it. Everybody said, look out, this guy he's not a flash in the pan. He is a real deal. He is one of, if not the best player already in just his 2nd year.
Yeah.
And I think that 63-point record still stands.
It does still stand.
In the playoffs.
Good luck to anybody trying to break that. It's going to be really tough to break.
It's so hard for me to hear you speaking so highly of that Celtics team. I'm just like cringing when you're saying it. I'm like, I get it, but like
you need the balance. That's why I'm on here. You can't just have a Lakers fest.
It was cracking me up because I was like, wow, you can definitely tell that we're talking to someone in Boston sports because wow, I would never. Sitting here like, wow, why are we watching an MJ documentary? Why don't we have one on Larry Bird and the Celtics right now?
Exactly. We should be putting that on. We can storyboard after this is over and start making it.
We'll make.
Hey, well, Larry Bird's obviously a pretty good quote. He gave one of the best quotes of the 2 hours, right?
He absolutely did. All right, guys. Now we have to talk about this villain, Jerry Krause. I mean, I will say though, I loved the comic relief of Michael Jordan always poking fun at him just consistently, whether it's talking about his height, like, oh, you're going to come and do shooting lines with us? We got to lower the rim. Like, I was just like, the tension was so there.
For no reason too, like just out of the blue.
No reason. And I want to talk to y'all because I think one of my biggest takeaways was how vocal he was as a GM. Because I feel like nowadays GMs definitely are cool with their role of being behind the scenes, even owners, aside from Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, like they really are more behind the scenes people and okay with that. But he was bound and determined to be in the spotlight, which we had, Steve Kerr talking about that he had little man syndrome.
Yes. It kills me. It makes me so frustrated because like everybody knows, maybe things are different now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But everybody knows that like the number one thing is to make sure that your players are happy. And he's outright saying, what did he say? Organizations win championships.
Yeah, not players.
Yep.
Yeah. And MJ's just like, oh, okay. Did you play through the flu? Did you play through this and that? Like, did you play through your Achilles being ruptured and all this? Like, no, you didn't do any of that. It's so frustrating. Like, obviously he's still a great, it's hard to say. It's like calling the Celtics one of the greatest teams ever, but it's like
17 championships. Can't argue with that.
Get out.
16. We're close.
Last time I checked, that's
one was coming. One was coming. Anyway,
I'm having a hot flash over here. But it's funny because he obviously like helped put this iconic franchise together. But then at the same time, he's like mentally kind of tearing them down. So what good is that doing,
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how they kept talking about the fact that he wanted more praise than he was receiving. And it was really evident. And because I also paid attention to just how they constructed both of these episodes. I thought it was really interesting how they decided to flash forward to the 1997, 98, but then going all the way back. And then we'd randomly be back in 85 and like just the back and forthness. But it was there was method to the madness. And one of the scenes that I found really interesting was when they were all receiving their rings after the 5th championship. And they strategically had the GM Jerry Krause announce, literally, I think he got some booze.
Oh yeah, he got
like, and no one like, you know what I mean? And then right after that, they announced head coach. And then obviously, Michael Jordan and the praises and Scottie Pippen, and the praises were just illustrious. So it just kind of reinforced the fact that he was not getting any praise for doing any of this work. And I thought it was really interesting that they chose to put those scenes in there. Like, not interesting in the fact of them showing the titles, but the fact that they really showed that he was getting booed.
Yeah, well, the internet has a new villain, right? It's been Carol Baskin for a few weeks, and now it's her spotlight has gone out, and now it's Jerry Krause. I don't know if any of you guys, you all grew up with Space Jam too, obviously.
Yes.
And now the hot internet rumor in the streets is they based Swackhammer, the coach of the Monstars, off of Jerry Krause's appearance, and it kind of looks obvious now. It's like, obviously Michael Jordan.
Oh my God,
a short fat guy.
It's a similar look. I feel like that is a really good rumor that has a lot of truth to it.
Just some like shade thrown in there.
Funny.
Like the ultimate shade and troll job would be that.
There's gonna be like a
like,
quarantine
I feel like someone
Mount Rushmore of like quarantine villains, and so it's gonna be Carol Baskin, Jerry Krause.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm sure there will be another villain.
Who's next? Rudy Gobert. Rudy
Gobert. Yeah, he deservedly so.
Facts. Yeah, it was, and then not only that, like it didn't just stop with his treatment of the players, but also just, I couldn't with his pettiness, how he purposely didn't invite Phil Jackson to his stepdaughter's wedding, but invited everyone else.
Including the coach he was grooming.
And Tim Floyd. Yeah, Tim Floyd, right?
Yes.
Tim Floyd. That's crazy.
So I almost had myself thinking like, this poor man, people are writing him in the history books as being just a dark human that, is just malicious at every turn. But I will say that it was just overall just what I think spoke more to me than how they're kind of crafting him in this documentary is the sound bites that we got from the journalists of that time. And the fact that even the journalists have encounters of remembering that they could see the tension. They saw the animosity between the players and just the resentment that the players had for him. And I think that almost speaks more volumes than hearing these stories about, the pettiness and things like that.
But I mean, as journalists, we're tapped into sacred space sometimes, especially if you are a beat reporter as far as a team. And so, you know, there's a lot of trust that's there as far as being able to keep those things close and knowing which of those things to let out. And I think that there was a fair balance because some of those stories came out at the time, but just how explosive it was, how deep it went, I appreciated seeing that and hearing from the journalist perspective.
Oh, I did too. I love the fact that they, out of all the people I could have included in this era, that they used journalists. That speaks volumes about the role that, you know, we play in sports.
Exactly.
And like we help shape these type of documentaries. And another person that they're shaping to, I don't know how we feel about him so far. Guys, just give me quick thoughts on Scottie Pippen as a whole right now. Go ahead, Jess. I see you thinking.
I go so back and forth because
That was such an intense eye roll.
How was it? I didn't even know it was an eye roll. Well, I'm just like wrapping my head around so many different things right now because I'm thinking about the fact, first going back to your first thought about journalists, I thought it was very cool that they were showing someone like Bob Costas being back there covering
with full-on Justin Bieber haircut.
Yes. Oh my God, he's so cute. And then seeing him now, obviously, like it was just a very cool moment to see it come full circle. But going back to Scottie Pippen, he's just, I love him. I think that he unfortunately was done wrong with the money, with the contract and all that. But from what I remember, I go back and forth with this. So Jerry Reinsdorf apparently told him to not sign the contract.
According to him.
Right. Like no one was there. We don't know exactly. What we heard is that Jerry Reinsdorf told him, don't sign this contract. It's not a good contract. If you play better than the amount that I'm paying you, like that's it. You're still going to get paid this amount. I'm not going to go back on my word. But if you, if you get injured, you're still going to have this pay. So Scottie Pippen growing up in the ghetto, so to speak, in poverty, in a bad area, he thought he was doing the right thing for his family. And at the time, I think it was the right thing, but that's a very long contract. So for that reason, I think it's a little difficult. But him as a person, I think he is so great because MJ calls him the greatest wingman ever. You see MJ getting like almost teary-eyed when he talks about him.
Yeah.
All the reporters saying, oh, what are your thoughts on this, that, and the other? And MJ's like, go ask him. If you have a question for him, go ask him. Like, I don't want to deal with this stuff. You know, like they're kind of looking out for each other on the court and off the court. And I just love their connection.
Yeah. And see, and like, again, just going back to like all these different acts of God in MJ's story and the fact that like just the sole fact of Scottie Pippen going to the Bulls speaks for itself. You know, I can't even imagine how on that draft day, how he got drafted, you know, he's sitting there wearing a Supersonics hat and they're like, and then the fact the reporter broke the news to him. And it was like, oh, did you actually hear that you're getting traded to the Bulls? And he was like, I did not. So, you know, it's just like, again, just kind of touching on this underlying thing that how journalists have had such a heavy hand in all of this. And not even just that, but also in helping shape Scottie Pippen for us, because I was almost bothered by at the beginning of episode 2, when we see Scottie at the 1997 conference finals presser, that the reporters are asking such leading questions. You know, like it's almost like they're just trying to get a headline out of him. Like, hey, how do you feel about being so underpaid? Does it bother you that you're on the trade block? Oh, also, does it bother you that MJ is trying to ask for more money? Like, I was like, whoa, we're just setting up this guy right now. You know, Jill, overall, Scottie Pippen, where were you?
I thought Scottie was a naive young kid. You have to even think about the fact that he even got to play college ball, to get into a position, to be drafted was incredible. I think that because of his circumstances, he was looking at longevity. He had a lot of mouths that he was responsible for, and it was fear-based. He didn't have someone. I mean, at that time, can I say the number of years? It was kind of commonplace in the NBA, maybe not for that money, but the contracts were a bit longer. I think 6 years, 7 years was sort of the standard. They moved around with the CBA. I think the CBA changed after they had the Jordan rules and things like that. But I think that He ended up making it up on the back end, as Larsa tweeted last night that Scotty was good. Don't worry about him. I thought it was interesting that Jordan said that he was selfish because of the surgery. I mean, we know what Jordan thinks, but we've heard Shaq say things that are similar, and he did that with the Lakers as well. So
I feel like that's almost a commonplace even now, that if players are unhappy with where they're at and they have a nagging injury, they just go and get surgery on it. So that way they're ready for the next team that they're at. For me, not necessarily where I saw it as selfish, but I almost saw it as petty of him telling people, I'm never putting on a Bulls jersey ever again. You know, it was just kind of like, let's rein in those emotions, you know where you are. And that was like my kind of like, oh shit, like he's serious when he said that. Jet, what were your thoughts on all the Scottie Pippen stuff?
Yeah, well, I think that they did a really good job sort of painting the upbringings of Scottie Pippen versus
Yep.
the upbringings of Michael Jordan. And Michael
Yep.
Jordan was this highly recruited kid
Yeah.
going to North Carolina, one of the most blue blood of blue blood schools. They have very clean HD highlights of Michael Jordan playing in the national championship game. And then you go to Scottie Pippen, goes to Central Arkansas as a ball boy, not recruited at all. Goes to a school that's not even Division I school, no one's ever heard of, makes his way onto the team eventually. The footage looks like it was taken, from a Charlie Chaplin film from the 1920s, totally different type of thing. Also gets drafted high, gets drafted as Scott Pippen, which I thought was interesting. He earned the TIE, I guess, to the end of his name. And that despite those sort of differences, what became of it was a perfect meshing of talents and a perfect meshing of personalities to the tune of 6 world championships. And you're seeing this disintegration, the tail end of it, but they also showed, I mean, just how dominant this Bulls team was. You couldn't have had a more perfect complementary skill set than Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. And then who they're gonna focus on in episode 3 is Dennis Rodman. It worked out perfectly on the basketball court. Just going back to what you said also about the journalists.
Yeah.
I like that they mixed in the journalists with former Chicago resident Barack Obama, which is how they
oh my God.
and also former
Bill Clinton.
former governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Yes, I was glad that they were properly attributed.
I wish that we could.
Obama didn't even get former senator of Illinois. He got former Chicago resident.
But then the fact like Steve Kerr, hello, everything he's gone on to do.
Yeah.
Bulls guard.
Guard. Steve
That's
Kerr,
who he is. I would love to talk to actually.
Well, the show opened with Michael Jordan going, "Hi, my name's Michael Jordan." It's like,
here,
guy.
They're just coming it down.
Look familiar.
Or what?
Yeah, I mean, they left us though, on a cliffhanger with what's going to go down with Scottie Pippen. So we have that in store, and I'm excited about episode 3. I think it's going to be even better than these first 2. But I think that, kind of wraps up where we're at after episodes 1 and 2. We talked about a lot. We dove into a lot, and we're going to keep doing this for the next 4 weeks. But Jess, let's do our special segment.
Yes. I love it. Okay, so the special segment is called The GOAT's Quotes. So today I'm going to share a quote from one of the past 2 episodes. I don't remember specifically which one it was from, but basically MJ said whenever they speak Michael Jordan, they should speak Scottie Pippen. When everybody says, well, I won all these championships, but I didn't win without Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
What an iconic quote. And I'm so glad someone said it, because Scottie Pippen is someone who was looked over, and like he was second on the team in literally everything, led the team in assists, 6th on the team in payroll, whatever. They could not have done it without him. He was such a huge asset to the team. So I was just glad that of all people, MJ was the one to say that.
And it almost seemed like, not trying to dive back into our conversation here, but I just had a thought that it almost seemed like they took advantage of the fact that he was on the quiet side and he was more reserved, and they knew that he was doing all of this for his family, and he had more at stake than guys, like Michael Jordan. So it almost feels like they kind of took advantage of all those qualities of him, because a guy, that was more vocal like Michael Jordan was, they probably wouldn't have done the same things. But then when Scottie Pippen decides to be vocal and decides to do something for himself, that's when he starts getting painted in a darker shade, I guess you could say. And so it's really interesting that I feel like it's almost his characteristics of his personality that like made him be underpaid.
Yeah, we talk about how everything's so different now with the one and dones, but things are also the same way. You have athletes unhappy with their contracts or being in trade rumors, so the more things change, the more they stay the same. You can look at it through both lenses, that the NBA has changed a lot since the heyday of Scotty and Michael, but there's still some of the same issues over contracts and being in trade rumors. So, players, I think, now can still relate to those players from the 90s and the 80s.
Yeah. And then guys, if you're watching live with us, just moving forward, bring your favorite quote with you, as you're going, as you're watching, write them down so you can share them with us. We'll be sharing ours in the future. I really liked it when Jess brought this up. I was like, oh, this is going to be so fun, because I was constantly just like jotting down things that especially Michael Jordan was saying, but that people were saying about him as well, because it also almost like paid homage to, like, again, we keep going back to his mentality. I think I forgot that I wanted to tell y'all this, that I think my favorite part in both of these episodes was when, I can't remember who was speaking, but when they were in Paris at one point in time, and they were saying that Michael Jordan played every single game to the best of his ability because he knew there was someone in the stands that had never seen him play.
Yeah.
And that perspective alone, like, blew my mind. Just
I love the scene in Paris, because the one guy who he gets one question, what do you think of the Eiffel Tower? Okay, that's a good question. Then you have the other guy trying to get Michael Jordan to sign like a napkin, and he gets just shamed. No, don't have him sign that napkin.
So good.
Michael didn't even say anything. He just looked to the side, kind of smiled, security.
Take care of this.
That was the best.
Yep. So, well, guys, you've got to hear our thoughts over this past hour. Jet is going to bring us some news and gossip to tell you what other people, and especially the Twitter sphere, had to think about this episode.
Well, obviously, everybody's really hungry for sports, right? No more than the professional athletes who play them. Everybody, it seemed like, in the NBA was tuned into this last night, because Michael Jordan is the reason a lot of them play basketball. And a lot of them had a lot to say, especially, for some reason, it seemed like every player on the Portland Trailblazers was tweeting, past and present. Not sure why.
They were like trending, because I think the whole organization had a realization that they passed up on Michael Jordan. It's kind of like the Bears, no offense, passing up on Patrick Mahomes. Some things you're just always going to regret.
Yeah, it's like that. It's the Trailblazers have done that a couple of times. They also passed up on Kevin Durant, so it's a history of failure with the Portland Trailblazers. But for some of the tweets that I like, well, the first one, I'll start with a Trailblazer. Damian Lillard said, "Mike is from another planet, and Scottie Pippen was slept on like an MF."
He's not wrong.
I would, if he had swore, I would have swore. He just wrote MF. We got Dwayne Wade. This is one I really like from Dwayne Wade, who's a player that I, as a Celtics fan, I really detested. But I like this tweet from him. MJ had it. He had it. He was chosen to be the GOAT. And I like that a lot, because he played with somebody. This is going to go back to the LeBron Jordan thing. Dwayne Wade is very close to one of the best friends of LeBron James, who I think fancies himself the greatest player of all time. And here's his buddy Dwayne Wade saying, "Nope, it is Michael Jordan." So that one might create some fire on the Twitter sphere. We talked about that Jerry Krause quote, right? That organizations win championships, not players. Darius Miles, former player in the NBA, former player for the Clippers, Celtics, Trailblazers. He's had this to say. Jerry Krause said organizations win championships, not players. Well, that organization has not won a championship since.
That is a poignant quote.
Yep.
And then perhaps my favorite one, because of all the mentions, Rudy Gobert said Scottie Pippen's impact on that team is still underrated. While true, none of the mentions had anything to do with that. Everybody just blamed him for the spread of coronavirus.
For sure. So he's never.
R.I.P. Rudy Gobert's mentions for life.
But really though, and I'm really glad that you brought up the Dwayne Wade quote, because that was something else I loved about these two episodes, is that they had the, small insertions of people having their one-off interactions about Michael Jordan or with him. And I loved how Dwayne Wade said in these episodes that Michael Jordan is the reason why he started playing basketball or wanted to be in the NBA. You know, like that was big, especially for Dwayne Wade to have the career that he had and for him to look at him that way. And then now how you're saying how he was like, he had it. It's like, it is such a crazy word because I feel like that's how you literally refer to someone when you're around them. You're like, they just had it. And it's like this universal saying that you know what that person is alluding to.
It's magnetism.
Yeah.
It's and you know, as a Celtics fan and a kid growing up in Boston in the early 90s, the Celtics were god awful, just horrible. And so what really my first memories of being a basketball fan were of Michael Jordan being great. And I think a lot of people throughout, because the Bulls dominated everybody in the 90s, a lot of people grew up saying, hey, I like my own team, but I'm going to watch every game Michael Jordan plays because he has it.
Yep, exactly. Well, guys, I think that just about concludes our after show here. We typically on our after shows discuss predictions, but I mean, this is history that we're watching, so I don't know how much
what's going to happen
here. So
where will Scottie Pippen go?
I don't know, but we'll be here to talk about it next Monday after episodes 3 and 4 drop on Sunday. Guys, thank you so much for watching us. And not only that, but thank you for making us the ESPN of, how does it go?
ESPN of TV Talk. Throws us off when we're talking sports.
No, I was like, wait a second. We're talking about things on ESPN. Yeah, the ESPN of TV Talk. That's what we are here at AfterBuzz. But right now, we are talking to you about the greatest thing that we all miss the most, and that is sports. So if you're watching us, make sure you subscribe, come back, watch with us for the next 4 weeks, as well as if you're listening to us on any iTunes, Spotify, all that good stuff, give us 5 stars. We really, really appreciate you. And also, we have tons of other after shows. Our articles online, if that's more your cup of tea, are awesome right now. They're really taking off. So we're here. Can't wait to do this with you for 4 weeks. With that, I am your host, Haley Graves. Jess, sign us off. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Overtime Jess and on Twitter at Jess Lucero Live.
Yes, you can. And Miss Jill, where can our people find our sports and culture analyst?
You guys can find me everywhere at Stiletto Jill, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of it.
And our wonderful, I really enjoyed having you here, Jet. I loved your perspective.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I loved your perspective. Where can everyone find you to keep talking to you about either the Celtics or, MJ memories?
Right on my couch because it's quarantine, so I have nowhere to go. At Jet Striar, Striar. Jet is with 1 T, Jet, Striar on Twitter. I will be tweeting about this, I'm sure, for the next couple weeks, and also about the NFL draft coming up on Thursday.
Hey, I'm right there with you on that draft coming up. Next biggest thing I'm most looking forward to. We've got a weekend of sports ahead of us, people.
Thank God.
Chills again.
In the meantime, you can find me. Yep. In the meantime, you can find me on Instagram, Haley Graves with 2 S's. That's HaleyGravess. And on Twitter, Haley1Graves2. Thanks for joining us, people. We out. See you next week.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.